The hammer slipped from Laura Lennox's blistered hands and nearly struck her foot, the rusted head separating from the rotted wooden handle mid-swing, and she stared at the pieces with tears threatening to spill as the September wind howled across the empty Colorado plains. She was 26 years old, widowed for 8 months, and trying to build a future out of broken dreams and borrowed hope on land her husband Thomas had claimed just before the fever took him. The half-finished cabin frame stood skeletal against the afternoon sky, a testament to her stubborn determination and complete lack of proper equipment. Loveland, Colorado was 3 miles east, a growing settlement in 1878 that promised prosperity to those brave enough to claim the surrounding territory. Laura had walked into town that morning hoping to trade eggs for nails, but the general store owner had looked at her worn boots and thin shawl with pity she could not stomach. She had walked back empty-handed, pride intact but supplies desperately low. Now she stood in the shadow of her unfinished dream, holding pieces of a hammer that had probably been inadequate when her grandfather owned it. The saw was no better. Its teeth were so dull they could barely cut through pine, and the handle had cracked straight through last week. She had bound it with strips of cloth torn from her oldest petticoat, but every stroke sent jarring pain through her shoulders. The nails she had were bent and rusted, salvaged from the old soddy she was living in while building the cabin. Thomas had promised her a real house with wooden floors and glass windows. She was determined to build it herself, even if it killed her. "You are going to hurt yourself with those tools." Laura spun around, heart hammering. A man sat astride a bay gelding not 20 feet away, and she wondered how long he had been watching. He was tall even sitting down, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days of stubble shadowing his jaw. His clothes were dusty from travel, but his boots were good quality, and his saddle well maintained. He looked to be perhaps 30 years old, with gray eyes that held neither pity nor judgment, just simple observation. "My tools are my own business," Laura said, straightening her spine despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "Did not say they were not," the stranger replied mildly. He swung down from his horse with easy grace, and Laura took an involuntary step backward. He noticed and stopped, holding both hands slightly away from his body in a gesture of peace. "Name is Vincent Ortiz. I am passing through on my way to Denver, saw you struggling from the road." "I am not struggling. I am managing." Vincent looked pointedly at the broken hammer, then at the cabin frame listing slightly to the left where one support beam had been improperly secured. "Sure you are." The tears Laura had been fighting suddenly burned hot behind her eyes. "If you have come to mock me, you can leave." "I have had my fill of folks telling me what I cannot do." Something shifted in Vincent's expression. "I have not come to mock anyone. I have come to offer help, if you will take it." He walked to his horse and began untying a bundle from behind his saddle. "I am a carpenter by trade. Was working in Cheyenne all summer, heading home to Denver for the winter. Got paid well and bought new tools for my next job. Still got my old set packed up, and they are considerably better than what you are working with." Laura watched suspiciously as he unwrapped oiled canvas to reveal a hammer with a solid hickory handle, a saw with gleaming teeth, a level, a plane, and various other implements that looked like treasures to her desperate eyes. "Why would you give me your tools?" "Not giving. Offering to lend them. Or better yet, offering to use them myself to help you finish this cabin." He met her gaze steadily. "No strings attached. You need help. I can provide it. Simple as that. Nothing is ever that simple. Sometimes it is." Vincent set the tools down on the flattest piece of ground he could find. "Look, Mrs. Lennox. Laura Lennox. Mrs. Lennox. Winter comes early up here. You have maybe 6 weeks before the first real snow. That cabin is not going to be finished in 6 weeks working alone with broken tools, and you cannot spend another winter in that soddy over there." He gestured toward the dugout shelter half buried in the hillside. "I can see the roof is already sagging." He was right, and Laura hated that he was right. The soddy had leaked during the last rain, and she had woken to find a snake curled up near her pallet seeking warmth. She had killed it with her broken-handled shovel, but the incident had robbed her of several nights of sleep. "I cannot pay you. Did not ask you to." "Then why help me at all? You do not know me." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Had a sister once. Her husband died in a mine collapse outside of Denver, left her with 2 babies and debts he had not told her about. Creditors took everything, and she was too proud to ask for help until it was too late. She tried to make it through the winter of '75 in a tent with those babies." His jaw worked. They did not make it. Laura felt the air leave her lungs. "I am sorry, me too, every day." He focused on her again, and she saw old grief in his eyes mixed with determination. "I cannot help Maria now, but I can help you, so let me." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain. Laura looked at her broken tools, at her listing cabin frame, at the worn hands that were all she had to work with. Pride was cold comfort on a winter night. "All right," she said quietly. "All right, thank you." Vincent nodded once, businesslike. "First thing is to get that frame properly squared and braced before we go any further. You have been working off measurements or just eyeballing it?" "I had measurements Thomas drew up, but I lost the paper in a windstorm last month. I have been doing my best." "Your best is not bad for someone working alone with inadequate equipment. Foundation is solid at least. You do that yourself too?" "Yes, took me 3 weeks." Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "You are tougher than you look, Mrs. Lennox." "I have had to be." They worked until the sun hung low and gold over the mountains to the west, Vincent patiently showing Laura how to use the level to check whether the supports were true, how to properly sink a nail so the wood would not split. His tools felt like magic in her hands after months of fighting with broken implements. The saw cut through pine like butter. The hammer drove nails with satisfying authority. As the light began to fail, Vincent stepped back and surveyed their progress. They had torn down the worst of the crooked framing and rebuilt it properly. "That will hold," he said with satisfaction. "We will need to let the bracing set overnight before we continue. You have somewhere I can bed down." "I can sleep in my roll under the stars if need be, but I would not say no to a roof." Laura hesitated. The soddy had barely enough room for her, let alone a guest, but she could not send him away after he had helped her so much. "The soddy is small, but you are welcome to share it. I have stew left from yesterday that I can warm up." Sounds like a feast compared to the jerky I have been eating for 3 days straight. The interior of the soddy was dim and earth-smelling, but Laura had done her best to make it comfortable. She had sewn curtains from flour sacks to divide her sleeping area from the main space, and she kept the dirt floor swept clean. There was a small iron stove Thomas had bought, a rickety table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding her meager supplies. It was not much, but it was clean. Vincent had to duck his head to enter. He looked around, and Laura braced for criticism, but he just nodded. "Snug. That is good for winter." She lit the oil lamp and hung it from its hook while Vincent brought in his saddle bags and bedroll. He set them by the door, careful not to encroach on her space. Laura stirred up the fire in the stove and set the pot of stew to warm, hyper-aware of his presence in the small room. It had been a long time since she had shared space with a man, and she felt suddenly awkward. "Coffee," she offered. "Please." They settled into a surprisingly comfortable silence as the stew heated and coffee perked. Vincent sat at the table cleaning dirt from beneath his fingernails while Laura sliced the last of her bread. It was a companionable quiet, the kind that did not need filling with chatter. When they sat down to eat, Vincent ate with the appreciation of a man who had been traveling long and hard. "This is good," he said after the first bite. "Real good. What is that spice?" "Sage. Grows wild near the creek. I dry it and keep it for cooking." Laura found herself relaxing slightly. "Not much meat in it, I am afraid. Rabbit is getting scarce as winter approaches." "Rabbit, is it? You hunt yourself?" "I set snares. Thomas taught me before he—" She stopped, swallowed. Before. Vincent did not push, just nodded and kept eating. After a moment he said, "He claimed this land." "Yes, filed properly with the land office in Greeley last spring. Died in July. Fever came on fast." The words were still hard to say. "He was healthy one day, burning up the next, gone within the week. I buried him on the rise over there." She gestured vaguely northward. "He loved the view." "I am sorry for your loss." "Everyone is sorry. No one knows what to do about it, though." Laura heard the bitterness in her own voice and winced. "I apologize. That was unkind. It was honest. Nothing wrong with honest." Vincent set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "You are angry." "You got a right to be. Life dealt you a hard hand." "Life deals everyone hard hands eventually. True enough. But that does not make yours any easier to bear." They finished the meal in silence. Laura washed the dishes in the basin while Vincent saw to his horse, making sure the gelding was properly hobbled and had access to the creek. When he came back in, full dark had fallen, and the temperature was dropping fast. "Gets cold up here at night," Laura said, pulling her shawl tighter. "Mountain country. I grew up in Denver, so I am used to it." Vincent spread his bedroll near the door, as far from her curtained sleeping area as the small space allowed. "I will be up at first light to get started on the cabin. That work for you?" "Yes. Thank you again, Mr. Ortiz." "Vincent is fine. We are going to be working together for a spell, may as well be on first-name terms." "Then you should call me Laura." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, chasing away the weathered hardness and showing the kind man beneath. "Good night, Laura." "Good night, Vincent." Laura lay in her narrow bed behind the curtain, listening to Vincent settle into his bedroll, the quiet sounds of him removing his boots and arranging his blankets. It felt strange to have another person in the space that had been hers alone for months, but not unpleasant, just different. She found herself feeling safer than she had since Thomas died, and that was perhaps the strangest thing of all. Morning came cold and clear. Laura woke to find Vincent already up, the fire stoked and coffee brewing. He had stepped outside to give her privacy to dress, a courtesy she appreciated. She quickly braided her hair and splashed cold water on her face from the basin before joining him. The cabin looked better in the morning light, the framework now standing true and solid. Vincent was examining the pile of lumber Laura had accumulated, sorting through it with a practiced eye. "Some of this is too warped to use for walls," he said when she approached. "But we can use it for interior framing. You have enough good boards to finish the exterior if we are careful. What were you planning for the roof?" "Shingles. I have been splitting them myself from cedar logs." He looked at the pile of rough shingles she had painstakingly crafted. "These will work. You have a good hand for it." The praise warmed her more than it should have. They spent the morning raising the first wall, Vincent explaining as they worked how to brace it properly, how to check for plumb and level. Laura had thought she understood basic carpentry from watching Thomas, but Vincent taught her tricks she never would have known, small techniques that made the work easier and stronger. By midday, they had 2 walls standing. Laura made johnnycakes and fried salt pork for lunch, and they ate sitting on the foundation of what would become her front porch. The September sun was warm despite the chill in the air, and the view from her land stretched for miles across rolling prairie toward distant mountains. "This is good land," Vincent observed, looking around. "Water nearby, trees for lumber, enough flat ground for farming and grazing. Your husband chose well." "He had dreams," Laura said softly. "Big dreams. A cabin first, then a barn, then cattle. Maybe children someday." She stopped, the familiar grief rising. "He had it all planned out. You can still do those things." "By myself? Who says you have to be by yourself forever?" Vincent looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "You are young yet, Laura. You have a lot of life ahead of you." "I was married. I took vows. And you kept them until death parted you. Thomas would not want you to stop living because he could not stay." Laura had heard similar things from well-meaning people in Loveland, usually followed by suggestions about eligible men in need of wives. But from Vincent it sounded different, not like pressure, just simple truth. "Maybe," she said, "someday. Right now I just want to finish this cabin and prove I can make it on my own." "Fair enough." They worked through the afternoon, raising the third wall and beginning the fourth. Vincent worked with efficient economy of motion, never wasting energy, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Laura found herself watching him when she thought he was not paying attention, noticing the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, the concentration on his face when he measured a cut, the gentle way he handled the tools. He caught her looking once and raised an eyebrow. She felt her cheeks heat and quickly looked away, focusing intently on the board she was holding. She heard him chuckle softly, but he did not comment, just went back to work. By evening the fourth wall stood complete, and the cabin looked suddenly real, no longer just a skeleton but an actual structure. Laura stood inside the empty space that would be her home and felt tears prick her eyes. "We did it," she said wonderingly. "It is actually happening." Vincent stood in what would be the doorway, satisfaction on his face. "Told you it would. Tomorrow we start on the roof joists. Once the roof is on and sealed, worst of winter can come and you will be safe inside." That night, Laura made a better dinner. Venison from a doe she had shot the previous week and preserved in her cool box down by the creek. She roasted it with wild onions and turnips, and Vincent ate with evident enjoyment. They talked more easily now, the initial awkwardness fading into something more comfortable. Vincent told her about growing up in Denver when it was barely more than a mining camp, about learning carpentry from his father, who had built half the original structures in the city, about his sister Maria, who had been beautiful and kind and died too young, about wandering the territory, taking jobs where he could find them, never staying anywhere too long. Laura talked about her childhood in Kansas, about meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 19, about their decision to come to Colorado and claim land under the Homestead Act, about the terror and grief of those 3 days watching the fever consume him, unable to do anything but wipe his forehead and pray, about the loneliness that followed, so profound it was like physical pain. "It gets easier," Vincent said quietly. "The grief never goes away, but it gets easier to carry." "How long has it been since your sister died?" 3 years this past winter. "And you still carry it?" "I do, but it does not break me anymore. That is the difference." They sat in silence for a while, the oil lamp flickering between them, casting shadows on the earthen walls. Outside a coyote howled, lonely and distant. Laura found herself not wanting the evening to end, not wanting to retreat behind her curtain and lie alone in the dark. "Tell me about Denver," she said. "What is it like now?" Vincent's face brightened. "Growing like a weed. Every time I go back there are new buildings, new people. They are talking about bringing the railroad through, which will change everything. Streets are still mud when it rains, but there are brick buildings going up, proper hotels, even an opera house." "An opera house? Really?" Really. I worked on it 2 years ago. Beautiful building, seats maybe 400 people. They bring in performers from back east. He leaned back in his chair. You should see it sometime. Maybe I will, Laura said, though Denver might as well have been New York for all the likelihood of her getting there any time soon. The days fell into a rhythm. Up at dawn, work until the light failed, simple meals shared in the warm glow of the lamp. The cabin took shape beneath their hands, walls solid and true, roof joists spanning the space overhead. Vincent taught Laura to shingle a roof, showed her how to overlap them so water would run off rather than seep through. They worked side by side on the sloping surface, the ground seeming very far away. Do not look down if it makes you dizzy, Vincent advised, hammering nails with quick, sure strokes. I am not dizzy. Laura positioned another shingle carefully. Heights do not bother me. Good. Some people cannot handle it. They were nearly finished with the roof when a wagon came rattling up the road from Loveland. Laura looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. She recognized the rig as belonging to Samuel Peters, who owned the general store, and her stomach tightened with anxiety. She did not owe him money, but neither could she afford to buy anything, and his visits were rarely social. Vincent followed her gaze. Friend of yours, store owner from town. I cannot imagine what he wants. They climbed down from the roof as the wagon pulled up. Samuel was a heavy-set man in his 50s with mutton-chop whiskers and a perpetually worried expression. He nodded to Laura and eyed Vincent with open curiosity. Mrs. Lennox, I was not aware you had hired help. This is Vincent Ortiz, Laura said carefully. He is helping me finish the cabin. I see. Samuel's tone suggested he saw quite a bit more than that, none of it proper. Folk in town have been talking. A woman alone, a strange man living out here. Laura felt her temper flare. Mr. Ortiz is a gentleman who has kindly offered his assistance. My living arrangements are no concern of the town. Now, Mrs. Lennox, I meant no offense. Just concerned for your reputation is all. My reputation survived burying my husband alone and living in a hole in the ground. I think it can survive someone helping me build a house. Laura crossed her arms. Was there something you needed, Mr. Peters? Samuel looked uncomfortable. Actually, I came to bring you this. He reached into the wagon and pulled out a crate. Supplies, flour, sugar, salt, coffee, some canned goods. Mrs. Henderson at the church organized it. Said no woman should be out here without proper provisions. Laura's anger deflated into embarrassment. That is kind, but I cannot accept charity. It is not charity. It is neighbors helping neighbors. Samuel set the crate down. Mrs. Henderson was quite insistent. Said to tell you she expects you in church come Sunday to thank the ladies yourself. Vincent stepped forward. That is generous of your community, Mr. Peters. Mrs. Lennox has been working herself to the bone trying to get ready for winter. This will help considerably. Samuel sized Vincent up, taking in the quality of his tools, the solid workmanship evident in the cabin. Some of the suspicion faded from his eyes. You do good work, Mr. Ortiz. Thank you, I try. After Samuel left, Laura stared at the crate of supplies, feeling a complicated mix of gratitude and shame. I hate being a charity case, she muttered. You are not a charity case. You are part of a community that takes care of its own. There is no shame in that. Vincent picked up the crate and carried it toward the soddy. Besides, now you have coffee that is not half chicory. I would call that a blessing. Laura found herself smiling despite her discomfort. The coffee is not that bad. It is pretty bad, Laura. I have been drinking it to be polite, but it is bad. Well, if you do not like it, you can make it yourself from now on. Deal. Sunday came, and Laura dressed in her best dress, a dark blue calico that had been her second best when Thomas was alive but was now the finest thing she owned. She braided her hair carefully and pinned it up, trying to look respectable. Vincent wore clean clothes and had shaved, transforming from rough frontiersman to presentable gentleman. They rode into Loveland together on Vincent's horse, Laura sitting behind him because her own mare had gone lame the previous week. She tried not to think about how her arms wrapped around his waist, how solid and warm he felt, how her cheek rested against his back as they rode. It meant nothing. It was simply practical. The church was a simple white building at the edge of town, its bell tower visible for miles across the prairie. People were gathering for service when they arrived, and Laura felt the weight of curious stares as Vincent helped her down from the horse. She lifted her chin and walked toward the church with her spine straight. Mrs. Henderson met them at the door, a formidable woman in her 60s who ran both the church ladies' auxiliary and most of the town through sheer force of personality. "Laura, dear, so glad you could come. And this must be the helpful young man we have heard about. Vincent Ortiz, madam, pleased to meet you." Mrs. Henderson looked him over with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You have been helping Laura with her cabin." "Yes, madam. That is very Christian of you. We need more men willing to help widows and orphans." She patted Laura's arm. "You look thin, dear. Are you eating enough?" "Yes, Mrs. Henderson, thank you for the supplies. They were very generous." "Nonsense. Thomas was a good man and you are a good woman. We take care of our own." She ushered them inside. "Now, come sit. Service is about to start." The church was full, every pew packed with families in their Sunday best. Laura felt conspicuous as she and Vincent found seats near the back, aware of whispers and sidelong glances. Let them talk, she thought fiercely. She had done nothing wrong. The sermon was about charity and community, and Laura suspected Mrs. Henderson had influenced the topic. Reverend Wallace spoke about helping those in need, about the importance of neighbors supporting one another through hard times. Laura felt tears sting her eyes as he quoted scripture about caring for widows and orphans. After the service, several women approached to greet her. Some were genuinely kind, asking about her health and the progress of the cabin. Others were obviously fishing for gossip about Vincent. Laura kept her answers brief and polite, introducing Vincent as a friend who was helping her prepare for winter. On the ride back to the homestead, Vincent was quiet. Finally, he said, "I am causing problems for you. People are going to talk. People always talk. It does not matter. It might matter if it damages your reputation, makes it harder for you to be accepted here." Laura tightened her arms around his waist. "I do not care what people think. You have been nothing but kind and respectful. Anyone who suggests otherwise can go to hell." She felt him laugh, the vibration traveling through his back into her chest. "You have a mouth on you, Mrs. Lennox. My mother would be horrified. She raised me to be a proper lady. You are a proper lady, just one who is not afraid to speak her mind." They finished the roof the following week. Vincent sealed the final shingle and climbed down the ladder, surveying their work with satisfaction. The cabin stood complete except for the door and window shutters, 4 solid walls and a weatherproof roof. "That will keep you safe and dry all winter," he said. Laura stood looking at the structure she had despaired of ever finishing, the dream she and Thomas had shared that now stood real and solid before her. "I cannot believe it is done. Not quite done. Still need to finish the interior, build you a proper door, hang the shutters. But the hard part is finished." Vincent wiped sweat from his forehead. "You did good work, Laura. You should be proud. We did good work. I could not have done this without you." They stood there in the late afternoon sun, the cabin casting long shadows across the prairie grass. Vincent looked at her, and something in his expression made Laura's breath catch. "I should probably be moving on soon," he said quietly. "Getting late in the season. I should get to Denver before the snow flies. Laura felt her heart drop. She had known this moment would come, had known from the beginning that Vincent was just passing through, but somewhere in the past weeks she had stopped thinking about him leaving. "Of course," she managed, "you have been more than generous with your time. It has not been a hardship." Vincent did not look away from her. "These weeks have been good, best I have had in a long time if I am honest. For me too," Laura admitted. "I have not felt this hopeful since Thomas died, like maybe I can actually make a life here. You can. You are stronger than you know." He took a breath. "Laura, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honest. Do you want me to leave?" The question hung in the air between them. Laura looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known to speak, who had worked beside her day after day, who had made her laugh and made her think and made her feel things she thought had died with her husband. "No," she whispered. "I do not want you to leave. Good, because I do not want to go." Vincent stepped closer. "I know it has not been long. I know people will talk, but Laura, these weeks with you have meant something to me. You mean something to me." Laura's heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Vincent, I was married. Thomas has been gone less than a year. I know. I am not asking you to forget him or stop grieving. I am just asking if there might be room in your life for someone else. Someday, when you are ready." She thought of Thomas, of the love they had shared, brief and bright. He had been a good man, a kind husband, and she would never forget him. But he was gone, and she was still here, still living, still needing human connection and warmth. "He would not have wanted me to be alone," she said slowly. "Thomas, he would have wanted me to be happy. And what do you want?" Laura looked into Vincent's gray eyes and saw patience there and hope and something deeper that made her pulse race. "I want you to stay," she said. "I want to see where this goes. I want to stop being so afraid all the time." Vincent smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I can stay. I am good at carpentry and Loveland is growing. I can find work here, build us a life. Us, if you will have me. I know we need time. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking for a chance." Laura thought about the long, lonely months ahead. Another winter alone in the dark. She thought about how right it felt to work beside Vincent, to share meals and conversation and comfortable silences. She thought about second chances and unexpected gifts, and the courage it took to reach for happiness after loss. "Stay," she said firmly. "Stay and we will figure it out together." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused from work, warm and solid and real. "Thank you," he said simply. They stood there as the sun set behind the mountains, hand in front of the cabin they had built together, and Laura felt something in her chest loosen and expand. Hope, she realized. It felt like hope. The interior work took another 3 weeks. Vincent built a door from good pine planks, solid and true in its frame. He constructed window shutters that could be closed against winter storms or opened to let in light and air. Together they whitewashed the interior walls, making the space bright and clean. Vincent rode into Loveland and found work, just as he had predicted. The town was growing, new buildings going up constantly, and skilled carpenters were in demand. He took a job helping build an addition to the hotel and returned each evening to the homestead, his wages tucked carefully in his pocket. "You should keep that money for yourself," Laura protested when he tried to give her half. "You are already doing so much." "I am staying here, eating your food, using your shelter. This is fair." Vincent pressed the coins into her hand. "Besides, we are going to need supplies to get through winter, and more besides if we are going to improve this place come spring." The casual assumption of a shared future made Laura's stomach flutter. They had not spoken again about their relationship, both of them seeming content to let things develop naturally. But there were small moments of connection that felt significant, their hands brushing when they worked together. Vincent's hand at the small of her back when they walked, the way they had started sitting closer during evening meals, shoulders nearly touching. October arrived with cold winds and the first dusting of snow. Laura moved into the finished cabin, leaving the soddy behind with relief. The interior was sparse but comfortable. Vincent had built a bed frame and a table, sturdy chairs and shelves along one wall. Laura's few possessions looked lost in the space, but it felt like a palace compared to the earthen soddy. "I will sleep in the soddy," Vincent said as they arranged furniture. "Give you privacy in here." Laura considered this. They had shared the soddy for weeks now without impropriety, separated by a flower sack curtain and mutual respect. But moving into the cabin together felt like a statement, and she was not sure she was ready for what that statement implied. "That makes sense," she agreed, ignoring the small pang of disappointment. Vincent nodded and did not push, though she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. That night she lay in her new bed in her new cabin, listening to the wind whistle around the shutters and felt absurdly lonely. She had wanted this, had worked so hard for it, and now that it was here, she missed the companionable presence of another person nearby. She was being ridiculous. They were doing the proper thing, the respectable thing. It did not matter that she missed him. The first real snow came in mid-October, blanketing the prairie in white. Laura woke to find the world transformed, beautiful and cold and silent. She dressed quickly and built up the fire in the iron stove Vincent had helped her install, grateful for the solid walls around her and the tight roof overhead. When Vincent appeared from the soddy, stamping snow from his boots, his face was reddened from the cold. "Winter is here," he announced. "That is going to stick. Coffee is hot. Come warm up." They stood at the window together, drinking coffee and watching snow fall. "First winter in your new house," Vincent observed. "How does it feel? Surreal." 3 months ago, I thought I would be spending another winter in that hole in the ground, terrified the roof would collapse on my head. You would have managed somehow. You are resourceful. Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out. Laura set down her cup and looked at him. "Vincent, I have been thinking. That sounds ominous. It is silly for you to be sleeping in the soddy when there is a perfectly good cabin with a proper stove right here. We could partition off a sleeping area for you. There is room." Vincent looked at her carefully. "People will talk." "People are already talking, at least this way you will be warm." Laura lifted her chin. "Besides, we know nothing improper is happening. That is what matters." "Is it?" Vincent moved closer. "Laura, I need to know where we stand. These past weeks, I feel like something is happening between us, but I do not want to assume. I do not want to push you into anything you are not ready for." Laura's heart raced. They had been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of them cautious, both of them afraid. "I care about you," she said carefully. "More than I expected to, more than I thought I could after Thomas. But I am scared. It has not even been a year since he died. What kind of woman does that make me, having feelings for another man so soon, a human one?" Vincent's voice was gentle. "You are allowed to be happy, Laura. You are allowed to want companionship and affection and everything else that comes with living. Grief does not have a timeline. The church says a proper mourning period is at least a year. The church does not have to live your life. You do." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and intimate. "I am not Thomas. I am not trying to replace him or make you forget him. I am just a man who has come to care very deeply for a remarkable woman, and I want to be part of her life if she will let me." Laura felt tears well up. "I want that too, but I am terrified." "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of letting myself love someone and having them taken away again." The admission felt like ripping open a wound. I do not know if I could survive that twice. Vincent pulled her into his arms, and Laura went without hesitation, pressing her face against his chest and letting the tears come. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring wordless comfort. When the storm passed, she pulled back, embarrassed by the wet spot on his shirt. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Do not be." He tipped her chin up gently, making her meet his eyes. "Laura, I cannot promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way, but I can promise that I am not going anywhere by choice. I can promise that every day I am here, I will do my best to make you happy. That is all any of us can promise." It was not enough, and it was everything, all at once. Laura took a shaky breath and nodded. "Okay, okay, stay in the cabin. We will figure out the rest as we go." They partitioned off a corner of the cabin for Vincent's sleeping area, hanging blankets for privacy. It was not perfect, but it was warmer than the soddy and more practical. Laura told herself it was simply sensible. Two people sharing resources to get through a hard winter. That was all. But as the weeks passed and the snow piled deeper, it became something more. They settled into domestic routines that felt natural and right. Vincent would make coffee while Laura cooked breakfast. They would sit together in the evening, Vincent carving or mending tools while Laura sewed or knitted. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. November brought bitter cold and more snow. Vincent continued working in town when weather permitted, but there were days when travel was impossible and they were snowed in together. Laura found she did not mind. Vincent was easy company, quick to laugh and thoughtful in conversation. He told her stories about his travels, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. She told him about her childhood in Kansas, about her dreams for the homestead, about the future she wanted to build. "I want cattle eventually," she said one evening as they sat by the stove. "Maybe 20 head to start. And chickens, definitely chickens. I miss having fresh eggs. Cattle need pasture and hay stores and a barn for winter." Vincent looked thoughtful. "That is a big undertaking." "I know, but this is good grazing land and there is a market in Denver for beef. Thomas and I talked about it before he died. It was his dream." "Is it your dream, or are you just trying to finish what he started?" The question made Laura pause. She had not really thought about it that way. "Both, I think. He dreamed it first, but I want it too. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters. Then we will make it happen." Vincent said it with such casual certainty, as though the future was already written and he had read ahead. "Come spring, we can start on a barn. Small one to start, just enough for a few head. Build from there as we grow the herd. Vincent met her eyes across the flickering lamplight. Unless you have objections." Laura's throat felt tight. No objections. December brought the darkest days of the year. The sun barely rose above the horizon before sinking back down, and the cold was profound and absolute. But inside the cabin, warmed by the stove and each other's company, Laura felt content in a way she had not felt since Thomas died. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly. Laura made a special dinner from their hoarded supplies, roasting a wild turkey Vincent had shot. He surprised her with a gift, a pair of sturdy work gloves he had bought in town with his wages. She gave him warm socks she had knitted from unraveled wool, careful stitches by lamplight during the long evenings. "These are perfect," Vincent said, turning the socks over in his hands. "You did not have to do this. I wanted to. You have given me so much, Vincent. A home, hope, companionship. Socks seemed like the least I could do. You have given me plenty too." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I have not had a real home in years. Sitting here with you, it feels like coming home." They sat there in the candlelight, hands clasped, and Laura felt something shift inside her chest. The grief was still there, it would probably always be there, but it no longer filled every space. There was room now for joy, for hope, for new love growing in the cracks of the old. "Vincent," she said softly, "I think I am falling in love with you." His fingers tightened on hers. "You think, or you know." "I know." The admission felt both terrifying and freeing. "I know, and it scares me, but it is true." Vincent stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet. "I love you, Laura. I have loved you since you faced down that store owner with your chin up and fire in your eyes. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you laugh when something genuinely surprises you. I love that you are brave enough to build a life from ashes." He cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" Laura's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning each other. Then Vincent's arms came around her, and she melted into him, letting herself feel the full force of the emotions she had been holding back. It felt right in a way that made her previous fears seem small and distant. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not want to waste time pretending this is not what it is. I want to build a life with you, Laura, a real life, a real future. Say yes." Laura's mind spun. It had been less than 6 months since Thomas died. Proper mourning demanded she wait at least a year, probably longer. The church ladies would be scandalized. People would whisper that she had dishonored her first husband's memory. But Thomas was gone, and she was alive, and Vincent was here offering her a second chance at happiness. She thought Thomas would understand. He had loved her enough to want her to be happy, even if that happiness came with someone else. "Yes," she said, and felt the rightness of it in her bones. "Yes, I will marry you." Vincent swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. Laura clung to him, laughing too, giddy with the enormity of what they had just decided. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "Tomorrow I will ride into town and talk to Reverend Wallace about posting the banns," Vincent said. "We can be married in 3 weeks if there are no objections." "There will be objections," Laura warned. "Mrs. Henderson is going to have strong opinions about the timing." "Mrs. Henderson can have all the opinions she wants. We are not doing anything wrong." Vincent kissed her again, quick and fierce. "We deserve happiness, Laura, both of us," they told Reverend Wallace the next day. The minister was a kind man in his 50s who had buried Thomas and had watched Laura struggle alone through the summer. He listened to their request with a thoughtful expression, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Mrs. Lennox, I will not pretend there will not be talk," he said carefully. "Your husband has been gone less than a year. Some in the congregation will feel this is inappropriate." "I know, Reverend, but I also know my own heart. Vincent is a good man and we love each other. Thomas would not want me to be alone out of some sense of propriety." Reverend Wallace looked at Vincent. "You understand the responsibility you are taking on. A widow with a homestead is not an easy life." "I understand, sir. I also understand that Laura is the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I would be honored to spend my life beside her." The Reverend was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, I will post the banns. If there are no legal objections, I will marry you 3 weeks from Sunday." Mrs. Henderson, predictably, had opinions. She cornered Laura after church the following Sunday, her face set in lines of stern disapproval. "Laura, dear, I feel compelled to speak plainly. This is too soon. What will people think?" "With respect, Mrs. Henderson, people can think what they like. Vincent and I are getting married, and we would appreciate the community's support, but we will proceed either way." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly. I am not trying to be cruel, child. I just do not want to see you hurt or your reputation damaged. My reputation survived worse this summer, and Vincent has been nothing but honorable. Laura met the older woman's eyes steadily. I know you mean well, but my decision is made. To her surprise, Mrs. Henderson smiled. You have backbone, I will give you that. Thomas would be proud. She patted Laura's arm. Very well. If you are determined, then we had best make sure you have a proper wedding. Come to my house on Thursday. We will make you a dress. The wedding took place on a cold January morning in 1879. The church was less full than Laura had feared, but those who came seemed genuinely happy for them. Vincent wore a new suit he had bought with his wages, and Laura wore a dress of soft gray wool that the church ladies had helped her sew, a compromise between celebratory and respectful of her widowhood. Reverend Wallace kept the ceremony simple and heartfelt. When Vincent slipped a plain gold band onto Laura's finger, his hands were steady and his eyes were bright. When she spoke her vows, her voice did not waver. I now pronounce you man and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was chaste, appropriate for church, but Laura felt it down to her toes. They were married. She was Mrs. Ortiz now, starting a new chapter with a new name and a new future stretching ahead. The congregation threw rice as they left the church, and Mrs. Henderson had organized a small reception in the church hall. There was cake and coffee, and people offered congratulations that seemed mostly sincere. A few of the older women still looked disapproving, but Laura found she did not care. She was married to a good man who loved her, and they had a home and a life to build together. That night, for the first time, there were no blanket partitions in the cabin. Vincent carried Laura over the threshold with ceremony, and they laughed together at the tradition. Inside, he set her down gently and took her hands in his. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have been in a very long time." Laura reached up and touched his face, still marveling that she was allowed to do so freely now. "Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time." "You were worth waiting for." Vincent kissed her softly. "You will always be worth waiting for." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people learning each other with patience and care. Laura had been married before, but this felt different, new and precious in its own right. Vincent was gentle with her, attentive and loving, and when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, Laura felt a peace she had not known was possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." Vincent's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering carpenter with nothing to offer but his hands and his heart. You offered me everything that mattered." Laura pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "You gave me my life back." Winter deepened, but inside the cabin they had built together, Laura and Vincent were warm and content. They talked about the future, making plans for spring. A barn first, then chickens, then maybe a few head of cattle if they could afford it. Vincent took steady work in Loveland, and Laura managed the homestead, hunting and trapping and preparing for the planting season to come. In February, Laura realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, not wanting to hope too soon, but when the symptoms became undeniable, she could no longer ignore the truth. She was pregnant. She told Vincent that evening as they sat by the fire. He had been whittling a wooden spoon, focused on getting the curve just right. "Vincent, I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him set down his work and give her his full attention. "What is it?" "I am with child. I am fairly certain. All the signs are there." For a moment Vincent just stared at her, processing. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it. But yes, I am sure." Vincent let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her carefully. We are going to have a baby. Laura, we are going to have a baby. His excitement was infectious. Laura found herself laughing, her earlier nervousness dissolving into shared joy. I know, I can hardly believe it. When? Late summer, I think. Maybe early September. Vincent set her down gently, suddenly concerned. Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting? I am fine. Women have babies all the time, Vincent. I am not made of glass. I know, He ran a hand through his hair, looking slightly panicked. I am going to be a father. That is terrifying and wonderful all at once. I know the feeling. Laura took his hands. We will figure it out together, just like everything else. Spring came late to Colorado that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought warmth and renewal. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Vincent and Laura broke ground for the barn, working side by side as they had the previous fall on the cabin. Laura's pregnancy progressed normally, though she tired more easily than before. Vincent fussed over her, insisting she rest frequently, bringing her water and making sure she ate properly. It was endearing even when it was annoying, and Laura let him fuss because she knew it came from love. By June, the barn was half finished, a modest structure but solid and functional. Vincent had hired a few men from town to help with the heavy work, not wanting Laura to strain herself. They bought 3 heifers from a rancher outside of Loveland, young stock that would form the foundation of their herd. Thomas would have loved this, Laura said one evening, watching the cattle graze in the pasture beyond the cabin. Her hand rested on her swelling belly, feeling the baby move. He always dreamed of having cattle. You are making his dream real, Vincent said, coming to stand beside her. That is a beautiful thing. Our dream now, Laura corrected. His first, but ours to finish. In August, as her time drew near, Mrs. Henderson came to stay at the homestead. You need a woman with you for the birth, she said firmly, brooking no argument. Vincent is a good man, but this is women's work. Laura was grateful for her presence. As her belly grew enormous and movement became difficult, Mrs. Henderson helped with the cooking and cleaning, freeing Laura to rest. The older woman had softened considerably toward the marriage, won over by Vincent's obvious devotion and Laura's blooming happiness. The baby came on a warm September evening in 1879, almost exactly a year after Vincent had first ridden up to the homestead with his bundle of tools. Labor was long and hard, but Mrs. Henderson was competent and calm, and when it was over, Laura held a squalling red-faced boy in her arms. Vincent was allowed in to meet his son, and the expression on his face when he saw the baby made Laura's heart swell. He is perfect, Vincent breathed, touching one tiny fist with a gentle finger. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Laura asked. Vincent thought for a moment. Thomas, he said quietly. After your first husband, if you think it is fitting, he should be remembered. Laura felt tears slip down her cheeks. Are you sure? I am sure. He was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. Our son should carry that legacy. So Thomas Ortiz came into the world in the cabin his father had helped build, on land his namesake had claimed, surrounded by love and hope for the future. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, built a proper chicken coop, expanded the barn. Vincent's carpentry work brought in steady money, and Laura proved to be a shrewd manager of their resources. By 1882, they had 20 head of cattle and a growing reputation for quality stock. 2 more children followed Thomas. A daughter, Maria, born in 1881, named for Vincent's sister. Then another son, James, in 1883. The cabin that had seemed so spacious now felt cozy and full of life, alive with the sounds of children playing and growing. Laura stood in the doorway one spring morning in 1884, watching Vincent teach Thomas. now 4 years old, how to mend a fence rail. Maria toddled around the yard, chasing chickens, while baby James napped in his cradle inside. The mountains rose purple and white in the distance, the sky an impossible blue overhead. It was almost exactly 6 years since that September day when a cowboy on a bay horse had stopped to offer help to a desperate widow with broken tools. 6 years since her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. Thomas would have been gone for 6 years in July, a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. She thought about him sometimes, with fondness and lingering sadness, but no longer with the sharp edge of grief. He had been her first love, and she would never forget him. But Vincent was her great love, the man who had appeared when she needed him most and stayed to build a life beyond her wildest dreams. "Mama," Maria ran up, holding a fistful of wildflowers. "Pretty, very pretty, sweetheart." Laura scooped up her daughter, balancing her on her hip. "Should we put them in water?" Vincent looked over from where he was working with Thomas and smiled, that warm smile that still made Laura's heart skip. She smiled back, surrounded by children and sunshine and the ranch they had built together. In 1885, they bought an additional 40 acres adjacent to their original homestead, expanding their grazing land. The cattle operation had grown enough that Vincent was able to give up carpentry work in town and focus on the ranch full-time. They hired a young man from Loveland to help with the heavy work, and the ranch continued to prosper. By 1887, Laura was pregnant again, their 4th child. She was 35 now, with silver threading through her dark hair and laugh lines at her eyes. Vincent was going gray at the temples, weathered by years of hard outdoor work, but he was still strong and healthy and devoted. 4 children, he said, resting a hand on her belly. "We are going to need to add on to the cabin. I have been thinking the same thing." Laura leaned into him, comfortable in the way of long marriage. "Maybe another bedroom and a proper parlor. I can start on it this summer, after the calving is done." Their 4th child, a daughter they named Rose, was born in November 1887. She was a sunny baby, quick to smile, and her siblings doted on her. The house that had once felt too empty now rang with noise and life and love. Laura sometimes thought about the widow she had been, desperately trying to build a cabin with broken tools, convinced she would have to face the world alone. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. She had been strong, that widow, but brittle with it, all sharp edges and desperation. Now she was still strong, but tempered by love and family and years of building something solid and lasting. The ranch was successful, the children healthy, and Vincent remained her rock and her joy. In 1890, Thomas the younger turned 11, already tall and serious like his father with a gift for working with animals. Maria was 9, bright and quick, learning her letters with enthusiasm. James was 7, the wild one, always climbing trees or chasing after the ranch dogs. And Rose was 3, still the baby, though Laura suspected not for much longer. "You ever regret it?" Laura asked Vincent one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were in bed, the ranch was quiet, and they had these moments to themselves. "Giving up your wandering life to settle down here?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering. "Not for a single second," he finally said. "I wandered because I had nothing to stay for. The moment I met you, I had a reason to put down roots. You and the kids, this ranch, this life we have built together, this is everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you," Laura said, taking his hand. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for offering to help. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me." Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You gave me a home, Laura. You gave me a family. You gave me a purpose. I am the one who should be grateful." They sat together as the stars came out. Two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, and had built something beautiful from desperation and hope. The years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Seasons turned, children grew, cattle were born and raised and sold. The ranch prospered under their combined management, Laura's careful planning and Vincent's hard work creating something bigger than either of them could have achieved alone. By 1895, Thomas was 16, already talking about one day running the ranch himself. Maria was 14, pretty and practical, helping her mother manage the household. James was 12, finally settling down from his wild childhood into a responsible young man. And Rose was 8, the baby of the family, charming everyone who met her. They had built a proper house by then, expanding the original cabin into a comfortable 6-bedroom home with a real parlor and a kitchen big enough for Laura's growing needs. The barn had been rebuilt and enlarged. They ran 50 head of cattle now, and their brand was known throughout northern Colorado for quality stock. Loveland had grown too, becoming a proper town with a railroad depot and brick buildings. The wild frontier of Laura's early widowhood had been tamed into something more settled and civilized. But their ranch remained, a piece of the Old West, a testament to what determination and love could build. In the summer of 1896, tragedy struck when Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Laura wept at the funeral, remembering the woman who had been stern and kind in equal measure, who had helped birth her children and welcomed Vincent into the community despite initial reservations. "She was a good woman," Vincent said, holding Laura as she cried. "She helped us when we needed it. I will miss her terribly, I know, but she lived a full life and she was happy at the end. That is something." Time marched on. In 1898, Thomas married a girl from town, pretty Sarah Mitchell, who had grown up on a neighboring ranch. They built a small house on the property, and Laura delighted in the prospect of grandchildren. Her firstborn, the baby she had born in the cabin Vincent helped build, was a man now with a wife and dreams of his own. The first grandchild, a boy they named Vincent Jr., arrived in 1899. Laura held the baby and felt the circle complete itself. From desperate widow to grandmother, from broken tools to a thriving ranch, from loneliness to a family so large and boisterous, she sometimes could not keep track of everyone at dinner. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, finding her on the porch with the baby sleeping in her arms. "About how far we have come. About that September day in 1878 when you rode up with your tools and your offer to help. I could not have imagined this." She gestured to encompass the ranch, the house, the family sleeping inside. "Any of this." Vincent sat beside her, looking at his grandson with wonder. "I remember that day. You looked so fierce, so determined not to accept help even though you clearly needed it. I knew then you were someone special. I was terrified, of failing, of losing the homestead, of facing another winter alone." "You never would have failed. You are too stubborn for that." Vincent said it with affection, and Laura laughed. "Maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you stayed. Me too." As the new century dawned in 1900, Laura was 48 years old, Vincent 54. They were grandparents now, with Thomas and Sarah's family growing and Maria courting a nice young man from Greeley. James was talking about going to college in Denver to study agriculture, wanting to bring modern methods back to the ranch. Rose, at 13, was still at home, the last of their children still under their roof. The ranch covered 200 acres now, with 100 head of cattle and a reputation that stretched across Colorado. What had started as a desperate widow trying to finish a cabin with broken tools had become a legacy, something solid and lasting that would endure for generations. One warm summer evening in 1902, the whole family gathered for dinner. Thomas and Sarah with their 3 children. Maria and her husband Robert with their new baby daughter. James home from college with stories of his studies. Rose, 16 now and beautiful, helping serve the meal. The table Laura had once set for just herself, and Vincent now held 12 people, 3 generations, all tied together by love and blood and the ranch that had started it all. Laura looked around the table at her family, at Vincent at the head of it presiding with warmth and humor, and felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what they had built together. Not just a ranch or a house, but a family, a legacy, a future. After dinner, she and Vincent took their customary walk around the property, just the 2 of them in the soft twilight. They walked hand in hand past the barn, past the pastures where cattle grazed, up the gentle rise to where a simple marker stood. Thomas Lennox, 1851–1878, beloved husband. Laura laid wildflowers on the grave, as she did every year on the anniversary of his death. "Thank you," she said softly, "for bringing me here, for having dreams big enough for both of us, for being a good man while you were here." Vincent stood quietly beside her, respectful of her grief and her gratitude. They had made peace with the past long ago, understanding that Laura's love for Thomas did not diminish what she felt for Vincent. The heart was big enough for both. As they walked back toward the house, lights glowing warmly in the windows, children's voices carrying on the evening air, Vincent said, "Do you remember when this was just an idea? When it was just broken ground and hope?" "I remember," Laura said. "I remember broken tools and impossible odds and thinking I would never make it through the winter. But you did make it. We made it. We did." Laura stopped and turned to face him, this man who had appeared in her darkest hour and stayed to help her build a life beyond her wildest imaginings. "I love you, Vincent Ortiz, today and always." "I love you too, Laura Ortiz. Thank you for letting a wandering carpenter stay and build a home with you." They kissed there in the twilight, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had created something beautiful from the ashes of loss and the hope of new beginnings. Inside the house their family waited, the legacy of their love made flesh and bone and laughter. The years continued their steady march. By 1905, Laura and Vincent had 8 grandchildren and another on the way. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in northern Colorado. Thomas had taken over day-to-day management, allowing Vincent to slow down a bit, though he still insisted on riding out to check the herds every morning. Laura had gray hair now, worn in a neat bun, and her hands were gnarled from decades of hard work. But her eyes were still bright, her mind still sharp, and her heart still full of love for the family and life she had built. Maria had given them 4 grandchildren and was expecting her 5th. James had married a girl he met at college and was teaching agriculture at a school in Denver, visiting the ranch whenever he could. Rose had married a neighboring rancher's son and lived just 5 miles away, close enough to visit frequently. The original cabin, where Laura had lived through that first hard winter, where baby Thomas had been born, still stood. They used it for storage now, but Laura sometimes went inside and remembered being young and widowed and desperate. Remembered Vincent appearing like an answer to a prayer. Remembered falling in love again when she thought she never would. In 1908, Laura and Vincent celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The family threw them a party, gathering at the ranch from all corners of Colorado. 30 years of marriage, 30 years of building and growing and loving. Laura looked at Vincent across the crowded parlor, still handsome despite his 62 years, still the man who had stopped to help a widow with broken tools and stayed to build a life. 30 years, she said when they had a moment alone. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like 30 minutes. Other days it feels like we have always been together. Vincent pulled her close. Either way, I would do it all again in a heartbeat, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They made the good parts that much sweeter. In 1910, tragedy struck when James was killed in a riding accident in Denver. The news shattered the family. Laura wept for her boy, her wild child who had grown into such a fine man. Vincent held her through the grief, both of them leaning on each other as they had through every trial life had thrown at them. They buried James on the ranch, not far from Thomas Lennox's grave. Laura planted roses around the marker, tended them carefully through the seasons. Loss was part of life, she had learned that young. But so was love and family and the determination to keep going even when it hurt. The ranch continued. Thomas and Sarah's eldest son, Vincent Jr., showed the same gift for ranching that his father had. Maria's children were growing strong and healthy. Rose's family thrived. The legacy continued even as grief left its marks. By 1915, Laura was 63, Vincent 69. They had slowed considerably, content to let the younger generation run the ranch while they sat on the porch and watched grandchildren play. They had 14 grandchildren now, and the first great-grandchild had been born that spring. "We did good," Vincent said one evening, the two of them rocking gently on the porch in matching chairs Thomas had built for their anniversary. "We did," Laura agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. You know what I think about sometimes? That day I rode up and saw you trying to build with those broken tools. If I had just kept riding, if I had minded my own business, none of this would exist. But you did not keep riding. You stopped to help. Best decision I ever made." Vincent reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Laura. You and this family and this life." "You saved me," Laura said softly. "I was drowning and you threw me a line. Then you climbed down into the water with me and we swam to shore together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch stretched around them, alive with the sounds of cattle and horses and family. This was their legacy, built from broken tools and second chances, from loss and love and determination to keep going when everything seemed impossible. In 1920, Vincent fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, progressed to weakness and pain. The doctor from Loveland came and shook his head gravely. Vincent's heart was giving out, worn down by 74 years of hard living and honest work. Laura nursed him through those final weeks with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything in her life. She sat by his bed, held his hand, reminded him of all the good years they had shared. The family gathered, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the house, saying their goodbyes to the man who had built so much of what they knew and loved. On a warm May evening, with Laura holding his hand and his children surrounding the bed, Vincent Ortiz passed peacefully into death. His last words were, "Thank you for the dance, my love." Laura wept as she had not wept since Thomas died all those years ago. But this grief was different, softer somehow. They had been granted 42 years together, had built a life and a family and a legacy. Vincent had lived to see his grandchildren grown and great-grandchildren born. He had died surrounded by love, in the house he had helped build, on land he had helped tame. They buried him on the rise with the good view, next to Thomas Lennox and James Ortiz, 3 good men who had shaped Laura's life in different ways. She planted Vincent's grave with wildflowers, the the kind that had grown wild when they first arrived, and visited every day that summer. Laura lived on for another 8 years, surrounded by family, watching the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's capable management. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the old days, about their great-grandfather who had stopped to help a widow and stayed to build an empire, about love and loss and determination and second chances. In the summer of 1928, Laura Ortiz passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76. She was buried on the rise between her 2 husbands, with roses planted all around. Her family gathered from across Colorado and beyond to mourn her passing and celebrate her remarkable life. The ranch continued for generations, the Ortiz name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and honest dealing throughout Colorado. The original cabin, where it all began, was preserved as a family landmark. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew Laura or Vincent still heard the stories of how the ranch started with a widow, broken tools, and a cowboy who stopped to help. The story of Laura and Vincent became family legend, passed down through the generations. The widow who refused to give up. The cowboy who stayed when he could have ridden on. The love that bloomed from desperation and determination, that built something lasting from broken tools and borrowed hope. On the rise with the good view, 4 graves stood together beneath the Colorado sky. Thomas Lennox, who dreamed the dream. James Ortiz, taken too soon. Vincent Ortiz, who helped build the legacy, and Laura Ortiz, who held it all together with strength and love and stubborn refusal to quit. The wind whispered through the wildflowers and roses planted around the graves, carrying with it the sounds of the thriving ranch below. Cattle lowing, children laughing, the steady rhythm of a working ranch continuing the legacy that started so long ago with broken tools and a cowboy's kindness. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, some said you could still hear them. The widow and the cowboy, laughing together over some shared joke, their love echoing through the generations they had created. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most desperate circumstances, that help offered freely can change everything, and that love, real love, builds legacies that last forever. The story of the widow and the cowboy lived on, not just in family legend but in the very land itself. Every board of the original cabin, every fence post on the property, every head of cattle bearing the Ortiz brand carried the memory of what 2 people could build together when they refused to give up on each other or themselves. It was a love story written in wood and stone, in children and grandchildren, in the very earth of the Colorado plains. And like all great love stories, it reminded those who heard it that courage comes in many forms, that kindness matters, and that sometimes the person who stops to help changes not just your day, but your entire life. Laura and Vincent Ortiz had started with broken tools and impossible odds. They ended with a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of love, determination, and 2 hearts brave enough to take a chance on each other when everything seemed lost. Their story was complete, every chapter written, every promise kept. From that September day in 1878 when a cowboy stopped to help a widow, through 42 years of marriage and family and building a life together, to their final rest on the rise with the good view, overlooking everything they had created, it was a good story. A true story. A story of the Wild West when it was still wild, when courage and determination could carve a future from empty land and broken dreams. And most of all, it was a love story, the kind that reminds us that second chances are real, that love can bloom more than once, and that sometimes the greatest adventures start with someone simply stopping to help when they could have ridden on by. The Ortiz Ranch stood for over 100 years, a living monument to Laura and Vincent and the life they built together. And every generation that worked the land, lived in houses built on the foundation they laid, raised cattle descended from their original stock, knew the story. Knew that it all started with broken tools, a determined widow, and a cowboy who brought new ones and stayed to help. That was how legacies were built in the Old West. Not just with strong backs and hard work, but with kindness and courage and love that refused to quit even when everything seemed impossible. Laura and Vincent Ortiz proved that, lived it, built it into every acre of their ranch and every beating heart of their descendants. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and grief and the passing of generations. But it also ended with triumph, with a life well lived and a love that transformed everything it touched. They had started with nothing but determination and broken tools. They ended with everything that mattered: family, legacy, and love that echoed through the ages. And on quiet Colorado evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass on the rise with the good view, past visitors swore they could feel it. The presence of two souls at peace, still together after all these years, still watching over the ranch they built from dust and dreams and devotion. The widow and the cowboy. Laura and Vincent. Two people who found each other when they both needed it most, who built something beautiful from broken tools and borrowed time, who proved that love and determination could overcome anything. Their story was complete, fully told, every chapter written and every promise kept. And it would be told for generations to come, a reminder of what was possible when two hearts were brave enough to reach for happiness even after loss, to build even when the tools were broken, to love again even when grief said it was impossible. That was the legacy of Laura and Vincent Ortiz. Not just a ranch or a family name, but proof that second chances are real, that kindness changes lives, and that love, real enduring love, can build empires from nothing but hope and determination, and two people refusing to quit on each other or themselves. Their story was done. Complete. A closed book with a happy ending written in children and grandchildren, in prosperous land and thriving cattle, in love that lasted until death and beyond. And that was exactly as it should be.